All right, let's get right into it. We all have data we need to present, right? But how do you make it actually stick? I mean, how do we turn a really dry report into a compelling story that actually gets people to do something? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down here. The timeless art of storytelling and how you can apply it to your data starting today.
First, let's try a quick little thought exercise. If you can, just for a second, close your eyes. Try to remember the story of Little Red Riding Hood. Think about the characters, the plot, the big twist at the end. You got it?
Okay, so here's the crazy part. In most workshops where this is done, about 80 to 90% of people can remember the basic story, even if it's been decades since they last heard it. The main points are just locked in their long-term memory. But why? What makes it so memorable?
To figure that out, let's look at two versions of the same tale. On the left, you've got the classic story we all know. There's a journey, a villain, real suspense, a dramatic rescue. It's got energy. Now look at the right. This is let's call it the corporate version. It's just reduced to these lifeless facts. Identified problem, wolf eats RRH. Solution, vendor employs tool, axe. I mean, the facts are there, sure, but the magic, the emotion, the reason we remember it, all gone. This is the problem we're here to solve.
So here's our game plan. We'll start by digging into why some stories stick. Then we'll compare logic versus emotion. We're going to learn from the absolute masters of storytelling and then get into super practical frameworks like the 3-act structure. And finally, we'll cover techniques to make your story crystal clear and introduce you to the single most important character in any presentation you'll ever give.
So really, why does a story like Little Red Riding Hood work so well? It really comes down to two things. First, the power of repetition. Come on, we've all heard it a bunch of times, and that helps lock it in. But second, and this is the important part, it uses a kind of magical structure, a clear plot, some twists, a solid ending. That combination is precisely what embeds a message deep in our minds.
And that brings us to this fundamental choice we all have to make when we communicate. Are we just using rhetoric, or are we telling a story? This is the central conflict when it comes to persuasion, and believe me, choosing the right path makes all the difference in the world.
Screenwriter Robert McKee lays this out brilliantly. See, on one side you have conventional rhetoric. This is our default mode in business, right? PowerPoint slides just packed with bullet points, facts and stats. It's all very intellectual, but it has a huge flaw. While you're presenting all your facts, your audience is sitting there arguing with you inside their own heads. But on the other side, you've got story. And a story doesn't just present an idea, it actually fuses that idea with an emotion. It engages your audience on a completely different level.
And this quote just hits the nail on the head. McKee reminds us that even if you win the intellectual debate with all your logic, it's often not enough. People are not inspired to act by reason alone. If you want to drive action, you have to connect emotionally. And that, my friends, is the power of story.
Okay, so how do we learn to tell better stories? Well, we can look to the masters. The playwrights, filmmakers, and authors who've been perfecting this craft for centuries. Their wisdom is just as relevant for your next slide deck as it is for a Hollywood blockbuster.
Let's start with the absolute foundation, laid out more than 2,000 years ago. The philosopher Aristotle gave us this simple but incredibly profound idea. Every story needs a clear beginning, a middle, and an end. It sounds basic, but this 3-act structure is the backbone of pretty much every compelling story you've ever heard.
Building on that, Robert McKee tells us why that structure works. See, a story isn't just a list of things that happened. It's the engine that connects a logical idea to a human emotion. It's what makes your data feel important, not just look important on a chart.
And finally, this crucial piece of advice from the amazing novelist Kurt Vonnegut. Keep it simple. He says we need to pity our audience. Be patient teachers, always trying to make things clearer and easier to understand. Because at the end of the day, your story isn't for you, it's for them.
Okay, let's shift gears from the master's wisdom to a practical framework that you can use right away. We're going to take Aristotle's big idea and turn it into an actionable plan for your very next presentation.
So here it is, the 3-act structure. Your beginning is all about the setup. This is where you establish the context, introduce the problem, and you answer your audience's very first question, why should I care? Then comes the middle. This is the conflict. It's the bulk of your story where you get into the details, you explore the data, and you show the journey toward a solution. And finally, the end is the resolution. This is where you deliver that climax, and this is the most important part, a clear, impossible to misunderstand call to action.
So now you've got the framework.
Let's look at a few killer techniques to make sure your story's structure isn't just good, but crystal clear and super effective. First up is this brilliantly simple concept called Bing Bang Bongo. It's all about using the power of repetition. So first, you tell your audience what you're going to tell them. That's your Bing. Then you tell them, you deliver the main course. That's the Bang. And finally, you wrap it up by summarizing what you just told them. That's the Bongo. Now, it might feel a little redundant to you as the presenter, but for your audience, it creates perfect clarity and makes your message stick like glue. Next up, let's talk about the logic of your actual slide deck. The first check is what we call horizontal logic. It's simple. If you only read the titles of your slides in order, do they tell a complete story? This makes sure your main narrative flows. The second check is vertical logic. This is about making sure that everything on a single slide, the title, the chart, the text, all works together to support one single clear message.
So how do you actually test all this? Well, here are a few simple ways. First, test your horizontal logic. Just read the slide titles out loud. Do they make a coherent story all by themselves? Next, check the vertical logic of each slide. Is there anything on the slide that doesn't directly support its title? Be ruthless here. You can also try a reverse storyboard. After you think you're done, write down the one key takeaway from each slide. Does that new outline match the story you thought you were telling? And finally, maybe the most powerful test of all, get a fresh pair of eyes on it. Ask someone with no context to take a look. I guarantee their questions will show you exactly where the gaps in your logic are.
Okay, we've covered structure, we've covered clarity, but there is one final, absolutely transformative idea that ties everything together. And it's about figuring out who the real protagonist of your story is. And here it is. This might be the most important thing you take away today. The hero of your story is not your data. It's not your company, and it's definitely not you. The main character in every single story you tell should be your audience. When you frame the problem, the conflict, and the solution all around them and their world, that's when your story becomes relevant, engaging, and just incredibly powerful. And when you embrace these ideas, you fundamentally change your role. You are no longer just a person presenting data on a slide. You are a storyteller, someone who crafts a narrative that gives that data meaning and ultimately inspires people to act.
So you've got the data, and now you have the tools of a storyteller. The only question left is, what story will you tell?